So again, please mute yourselves if you've not done yet. Put on your speaker view. And I'm going to call on John Hare, who is the president of the Battle of Homestead Foundation. He has some remarks to get us started. John?
Thanks, Suzanne, as always. Good evening, Battle Homestead members, friends, and guests. Welcome to the Battle of Homestead Foundation's 2022 program series. I'm John Hare. Tonight, we'll again dig deep in the fertile soil of American social and industrial history. And through the magic of movies and Zoom, we'll meet steelworkers from the Kiski Valley who struck their employer, ATI, for more than 3 months just last year. Their struggle is the story in Local 1196, A Steelworkers Strike. That's a movie, and I hope you were able to see this compelling document. Tonight, filmmaker Samuel George and retired president of USW Local 1196, Todd Barbiaux, are with us to discuss this widely underpublicized labor and community impact event. We're thrilled to have them as our guides. This story is recent history, but it still illuminates our country's long and torturous push and pull between the industrial capitalists and their employees fighting for a voice, a living wage and benefits, and safe conditions at work. A struggle throughout history with far too many casualties for workers and their communities. Looking back, we can ask, how are things really different today? What's the future for organized labor or for jobs for our kids today? Let me briefly tell you about the Battle of Homestead Foundation. Our founders were inspired by a dramatic labor conflict, the 1892 Battle of Homestead. The nation's eyes back then were on this thriving industrial town 12 miles downriver from Pittsburgh. The strong union, the Amalgamated, had built powerful alliances within the workforce, the community, and the region. They knew they had to defend their labor contract and its first-rate compensation and work standards. A lot of people are surprised to learn that in 1892, there were contracts that had strong and first-rate compensation and good work standards. Their employer, the Carnegie Steel Company, a monopoly steel coal corporation controlled, as you remember, by Andrew Carnegie and his henchman Henry Clay Frick, was determined to cut wages and break the union. When the contract expired, Frick built a 10-foot high wall around the mill, locked out the workers, and launched plans to import scab labor. The union then called a strike. On July 6, 1892, an epic struggle ensued, which, despite extraordinary resilience and militance by both the strikers and their allies in the town, ultimately resulted in defeat for the union, even though the workers and townspeople prevailed that day against the Pinkertons. You know the story. I'm not going to get too involved in its description. 400 armed detectives brought down under the stealth of night on barges down the river, and 400 Pinkerton detectives on the barges. Their mission was to land and populate and protect the mill so that scabs could come and work in the mill. It was a horrendous fight that day on the banks of the Monongahela, right at the historic pump house, the only remaining building today from that time. At least 7 workers were killed and at least 2 Pinkertons killed, and probably several others. The commander of the Pinkertons was wounded early on, and the only tugboat pulling the barges dislodged from the barges, picked up the captain, and took him away to medical care, and the barges were left abandoned with the detectives in the water. Eventually, the Pinkertons were surrendered and were escorted up the banks by an angry crowd with not a few blows and taunts. They were escorted essentially out of town, loaded on trains, and not seen again. But the Union was defeated, not because of that, but because some 8 days later, 8,000 state militia were sent into Homestead by Pattison, the then Pennsylvania governor, to occupy the mill and to protect scab labor. There are many sub-stories and revelations within this epic, far too many to relate tonight. The more we dig deeper and learn, we discover and celebrate what we call the seeds of hope in that resilient worker and community struggle. What are seeds of hope? We think it's a story or a discovery that another world is indeed possible. The mission of Battle of Homestead is to grow these seeds of hope by promoting a people's history, but also we work to empower today's workforce and build strategies for a future that benefits all working families in our nation. Our goal is to develop a regional center and institute for labor history and the future of work. 3 years ago, the COVID pandemic forced us to change how we do this mission. Our public panels, historic commemorations, lectures, concerts, and drama are still presented mostly online. Recently, we have cautiously begun in-person meetings and events, and yes, our weekly breakfast at the Homestead Eaton Park. The pandemic led us to new opportunities to reach out, educate, fundraise, and organize. Today, the seeds of hope still sprout anew, even as our country faces major social, economic, and political crises. But crisis can also mean opportunity. Since November 3rd, 2020, and again as recent as the elections last week, we can begin to see the light. We take heart and recognize the tremendous organizing by grassroots groups throughout the nation, many led by women, often in coalitions with organized labor. This heroic effort was the engine that in 2020 expanded the electorate, giving voice to millions of average working people. Thus was propelled the election defeat in 2020, and again last week, of a mendacious, anti-democratic president, I'm talking about in 2020, and his morally bankrupt enablers. But the hard-won progress is by no means assured to continue. Tonight, we again celebrate creative grassroots workplace organizing, alliance building, and people's history. We're optimistic about our mission as we see the growth of power for working women and men in their communities. So we say, come join us. Now I'm delighted to present Sam George and Todd Barbiaux, and I'm happy to introduce our moderator tonight, the Battle of Homestead Foundation's operations manager, Larry McCullough. Larry?
Well, thanks, John, and thanks for all of you for joining us tonight for a discussion of Local 1196, a steelworkers strike. The film was shot, as most of you probably have gathered, during the 2021 strike of USW workers against ATI, a specialty metal manufacturer now headquartered in Dallas, Texas. Strike lasted 4 months in several locations in 5 states, and this film focuses on the ATI mill in Brackenridge, PA. Our 2 speakers for tonight are Todd Barbiaux, who is the former president of USW, Local 1196, and a longtime crane operator at the ATI plant in Brackenridge. As you saw in the film, he was a guiding force in the strike and its progress. He's here tonight to offer his commentary, along with the filmmaker, Samuel George, who is a documentary filmmaker and holds the official title of Global Markets and Digital Advisor for the Bertelsmann Foundation. Bertelsmann Foundation was originally created in Germany in 1977. It is an independent, nonpartisan think tank with a branch that is based in Washington, D.C., and a global mission of promoting discussion about important economic, political, and social challenges that face the United States and Europe. Mr. George joined Bertelsmann in 2012, and he has produced to date 16 films, among them Harmony, Latvian Democracy on Russian's Border, Swing State, Florida, The Barry Farm, Community, Land, and Justice in Washington, D.C., Disrupting Democracy, the story of Italy's 2018 election, Breaking Point, the United States and Mexico at the ballot box, Crossroads, Turkey, Cuba's Digital Revolution, The Fight for West Virginia, and several more. He is co-author and editor of The No-Collar Economy, Exponential Change in the Digital Revolution. And please welcome Sam George and Todd Barbiaux. Sam, you going to run a clip?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. First of all, just want to say it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, especially to be here with Todd, as a guy I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and I'm so glad he's on the program, and the Battle of Homestead Foundation doing a lot of wonderful things. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, and we thought we would just kick it off by showing the trailer for the film as a stage setter. So I'm going to take 1 second and set that up, and we should be good to go.
Everything here has a story. Grandpap Lewis. That's a steelworker fist, I could tell. I worked for ATI, the old Allegheny Ludlam. Been there 33 and a half years. Started out as a 25-year-old kid looking for a job. It was a good place to work. You knew you had a lot of security. You'd always welcome your children to work there as well because you knew you'd make a good living for yourself. But things have changed. Try to take away our health care, take away our overtime pay, and now they're at the point they're even trying to take some of our actual work away from us. It's all about breaking the union. Sometimes you take on a union, you pick the wrong fight. There's guys coming up behind me, and I want them to have the same opportunities I had all these years.
I feel like we're the last line of defense for workers outside of the unions as well.
At the end of the day, we can't let this company break this union.
People are starting to get nervous, bills need to be paid, life goes on, and banks don't care if we're on strike or not. And they don't have a problem with taking our homes.
What's the chance that they're going to tell us the truth of what their health care costs are? I mean, come on now.
They can continue to keep it that way and starve us out.
They're trying to break the union, and we're helping them.
These are thousands and thousands of family-sustaining union jobs. We still need to make shit in this country.
When enough of us has sat back and said, enough, that's enough, then the machines will stop.
Sam, first question is to you. How did you hear about the ATI strike, and what made you decide to film it? Obviously, you go all over the world. What was it that drew you to Brackenridge, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a wild question to think about in retrospect, because so much work goes into something like this. It seems almost inevitable, like it was meant to be. And that was very much not the case. I mean, my assignment, because you have to remember, there might not even have been a strike. They came very close to resolving this before I even went to Western Pennsylvania. And, you know, once the strike happened, there was some people thought it might only be a couple days. There was no guarantee that this was going to be a 5-6 month thing. So to take it back to the beginning, just as you said in the introduction, what we try to do at the Bertelsmann Foundation with the documentary work is find people and perspectives that need to be heard but aren't being heard, you know, and somehow that are kind of reflective of a broader American experience. And what we try to do is people that might be ignored by typical outlets, or kind of get that drive-by media that everybody hates, you know, that get covered in sort of like 3 stereotypical sentences without really understanding what people are experiencing. We try to get deeper into that. And because of COVID, I had been having to work much closer to home, which for me is Washington, D.C., and I had done 2 consecutive documentaries in really urban American settings. I did one in Washington, and then I did one in Baltimore. And the idea was we need to get out. This was right after January 6th, 2021. So it was an incredibly polarized moment in our country. There was a feeling that there was one thing happening in certain part of the countries and something very different happening in other parts of the country. And of course, Pennsylvania was incredibly important in the last election. So there was suddenly this increased focus on what's happening in Pennsylvania, what's driving, what are people worried about, what are they talking about in Pennsylvania. So I said, okay, I want to do something outside of a city, and I want to do something. Pennsylvania is sort of accessible to Washington. I can drive there. So I just started researching. And, you see these different things. And of course, I started with political. Maybe I'll work with this local political community here, or something from a political standpoint. But I just started reading local newspapers. And one day I saw this notification that there might be a strike in Brackenridge, Pennsylvania at the ATI plant. And what really caught my eye was a photo. The photo showed this just picturesque, beautiful town of what, you might think of old school United States steel town. Like if somebody said that we're going to put a picture of that in your textbook, you could imagine a town like this. And then this big blue steel mill. And you guys, it might well have been Todd, I don't know, but they had a photo of guys standing out protesting. And I said, I want to know more about that story. I want to know what's happening here. A lot of times when you try to reach somebody, you get an answering machine, you send an email, nobody calls you back, nothing happens. I called the local 1196 office because that's what it said in the newspaper, that this was local 1196. I think it was most likely Pam who answered the phone, who I now know and is somebody that I have a huge amount of respect for, but somebody I didn't know then. And I said, look, I'd like to talk to Todd. And I forget whether she gave me his cell phone number or whether she gave him my number. But the bottom line was within a half an hour, we were on the phone. And Todd, a guy who's never met me and had no particular reason to trust me with this story, just from the very beginning was incredibly open. And I think that he got the sense that I was I was doing this for the right reason. But the timing was all wrong. And I know this is a roundabout answer to the question. I promise I'm getting there. The timing was all wrong. I wasn't supposed to start filming for 3 weeks. I was just making introductory phone calls. And he said, look, if there's a strike, it's going to happen, in Tuesday, in 3 days. And if you could get down here, you're welcome to film it. So that's what I did. I rented a car. I got down there as soon as I could. And that's why I was able to cover this from the beginning. And then the thought at the time was this was going to be a part of multiple stories, that I would do multiple stories in Pennsylvania. And you would kind of bounce back between different stories. But I felt two things happen. One is I felt pretty quickly that this was a story that needed to be told. I felt a really good kind of rapport with the guys in the union. They were really okay with having me around. And then if it had ended in a week, it wouldn't have been that long of a story. But the fact that it kept going and they kept having me back really allowed me to kind of pull it out and tell the whole thing. And now here we are, 2 years later, a year and a half later, and it seems like it could have never been any other way. But really the bottom line is the only reason it happened is because Todd was immediately, for whatever reason, open-minded to this random idea of having some stranger pack up some camera equipment and drive 6 hours through Maryland and into Pittsburgh area.
Yeah, Todd, what were your thoughts when you first heard there's a filmmaker on the line who wants to do a documentary? And what was the level of support for the strike at that point? First reactions.
So what actually happened was Sam did call my cell phone direct. And then I tried to get a little bit of his background, find out where he was from and get a little bit. Because right now, you don't know if you have a negative reporter. You don't know where this is coming from. You don't know who's on your side. You don't know who's friend, who's foe. You just don't know. But as I talked to him, I told him the situation, what was going on, and I told him, I said, hey, listen, if you want to get up here, you better get up here within the next couple of days because something big's going to come down. And I remember he said, hey, I'll have to call you back. He said, I got to talk to my supervisor. So then he called me back. He said, I got the green light. I'm coming up. I says, okay, I'll see you tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. So I met him in front of the Union Hall at 6 o'clock. And we rode around all evening. And I didn't know this guy from Adam, but we went over to the Fanny Sellers Memorial and gave him a lot of the local history of what has taken place at our facility. I took him out to the front of our Union Hall. I showed him our memorial that has 44 names of fatalities from our local that died in our plant. So, you can pick up pretty fast who's genuine and who's not genuine. You could tell that this guy had a strong interest in what I was saying, and you could tell that he's listening to what you're saying. So he had no ulterior motives, other than filming a documentary on us. I think most of the union members were very open to meet Sam. Once they see him around, hey, who's that guy? Is he for the local paper? I said, wait a second, this guy come all the way from Washington, D.C. to be with us, document what's happening to us as a union. No, it's not about Todd Barbiaux. It's not about any single member. It's not all about Fanny Sellers. It was about all of us, all the way from 100 years ago until what's happening to us presently. And I don't think anybody, do I recall, gave Sam any grief. I think everybody had the welcome mat out for him.
Yeah.
But that was just the way he presented himself too.
And that's not normal. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with somebody saying, hey, look, I'm not sure this is the right idea to have somebody here with this. I mean, I understand that completely, but Todd's right. It was a remarkably positive reception at a moment of strife and conflict and difficulty for people. I mean, it was a difficult moment for everybody. So I'm just genuinely thankful for that. It's not normal.
And you were the only person filming, right? You were
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you get people to forget that you were in the room? Because essentially, you have some incredible unscripted moments that are very intimate, very intense. People just open up completely. And how were you able to do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's a trick. It's magic when it happens. You spend a lot of time where it doesn't happen. I mean, so I like I've said before, this was the most filming I've ever done for one project. I have a huge amount of filming that I did for this. And a lot of it is, guys sitting around having lunch, You have to wait for those moments and earn those moments where the magic happens. And I think part of it is you benefit from having a small team. Like I'm one person. So, that's also not normal for a documentary. Usually you have a camera person and a reporter and a sound person and a this person and a that person. And you get to a point where there's, more people working on the movie than are working on their life. But so working with one person, you can get a little closer. I think, this stuff is also so important to the guys that they couldn't afford not to forget about me. This is their lives are at stake. This is, so when they're having a debate or a conversation, I don't think anybody had the time to worry about the camera person. They need the answers and they needed a plan and they needed to figure this out. And sometimes I'm not sure anybody you do, it may look like they forget about the camera, but maybe they don't. Maybe they're just comfortable with you. And they're able to talk to you as if you're having a beer, and there just happens to be a camera with you. And I think that's obviously what you're hoping for is to make somebody feel as natural as possible.
I think the one thing that happened with if I can speak on my behalf, is I think as I got to know Sam, I think myself and many of the union members recognized his level of empathy he had for us, and this documentary was powerful. It could have been a lot more powerful because I think he's seen many of us break, emotionally, physically, the language. He's seen all sides of us. So I think the fact that we all trusted him, he became a member of 1196 as far as we were concerned. He was our cameraman. He was one of us.
At what point, Sam, did you decide to not have any kind of voiceover? Because almost every documentary has some expert coming in or explaining something, or just a brief setting the scene. Aside from a few visual titles, it's just the union voices, families, the pizza business lady whose business goes out. How did you decide on that approach?
Yeah, definitely a great question. I think in this, every kind of and first of all, I don't think there's anything wrong with a narrator. The last 2 documentaries I've done since then that I've been working on have a narrator, and there's a purpose for it in a lot of sense, but it depends on what kind of documentary you're trying to make. And here, what I'm really trying to do is just help you. I know it's a cliche, but it's really true. Help you just walk a mile in the shoes of these people. And understand their experience. And again, we talked about people that don't have a chance to get their opinions out there or make their reality known. Well, if you're going to give them that chance, then give them that chance. You don't need to do the talking for them, And so that's what we really wanted, an immersion in the experience. So you almost felt like you were in the room. And in that kind of situation, a narrator detracts from it. And I think this is the kind of thing where you don't need to be told how to think or what you should be thinking, because it comes through so clear. And so a lot of times a narrator is also a shortcut when you just want to say something because you don't have the footage for it. Another benefit of having so much footage is we basically had every kind of moment that we might need. We had so much content that we didn't need one of those shortcuts. So, for me, if I don't need a narrator and can just let you kind of immerse in the feeling, then I would prefer not to have it. And again, I have to say it's because the men and women of the local were so open that there was no dates. They could say it in their own words. You didn't need anybody to say it for them.
Yeah, Todd, what were the comments that you've received from union members who have seen the film? Just generally.
I think a lot of the reaction was probably the same as mine. When you hear there's going to be a documentary, you think there's going to be a lot of not rated for TV language. You're going to hear a lot of tough guys, and raising hell and throwing road jacks and, all the from the 70s and 60s and 50s and 40s, whatever, But I think even for myself, the first time I seen the documentary, I was actually taken back because I was surprised. It wasn't really about steel workers making steel. It was about a documentary about exposing the human element of what a strike or a work stoppage or a lockout does to a human being, at all different levels. I mean, some it's not even financial. It's a matter of pride. For me, it wasn't a financial thing. It was pride more than anything. Because I work for a company listen, I'm not going to beat up the company because it is a good company. It's a good company run by some bad upper management people. That's my own personal opinion. So it is a good company. But, when you're working there, you take pride in it and you say, hey, it's not their company, it's our company. We're a union, we're a company, and, we're joined at the hip. And, the company likes that, especially when it comes to safety, because now their stockholders and their lenders and everybody else, they want to hear that. The customers want to hear that. Because then they know you're going to put out a good product. But, it's kind of tough when a company handpick when he wants you to be part of the team and not be part of the team. So, it just how I thought the documentary was going to turn out and how it turned out were two different things. Like I said, I think it exposed the human element more than anything on what it does to a person.
Sam, as you interviewed various union members for the film, were there frequently recurring messages that you picked up on, or any themes that you kind of got overall? I know there are various phases of the strike as it went along for the 4 months, but just in general, just any things
I think
you went through.
The pain that Todd talks about is real. And you can tell. Like, you could talk to somebody who say, I work at Starbucks and I'm unhappy for the following 5 reasons, but I don't have any sort of personal affiliation with Starbucks. I'm saying in their words. Whereas you could tell that the workers of that steel mill, many of whom had parents or grandparents that worked there, that it was something that meant a lot to them, that place, and that they would encounter that kind of treatment was deeply painful for a lot of people. And there are people that moved on from the union and moved on from the job to other jobs. And I think that's very painful for them. I think that people were hurt. And so one thing for me that's interesting is when I show this outside, you know, a lot of the guys, like Todd said, they kind of look like, when you first see them visually, you see tough steel workers. And then you watch the film and you just meet these fantastic people and sensitive people, repeatedly vulnerable. And not only vulnerable, but willing to be vulnerable, not trying to hide that vulnerability. And they say, so how did you do that? You know, how did you get these tough people? And I said, it's not something I did, it's who they are. And it's part of the problem in our country that you see that kind of thing and think, oh, well, these people must be tough guys. You know, they'll show you. It's like the saying is, people will show you who they are, so believe them. So, you know, people cared. People really, really cared. They were really, really hurt by the state of that relationship, because it was a relationship. I mean, it's a family there, and it was generations. And you asked me a recurring trend. I think that a recurring trend was just this concern for the future. That if you don't stop this now, if you don't draw a line in the sand, you know, what will it be? And it was especially interesting because it was a lot of the older guys that were fighting for somebody else's future, that are talking about, well, what about the next generation? Because when I was growing up, we had this, but I'm not sure it's going to be around. And the whole region kind of wears that. Like, it was interesting for me to see the malls, which had clearly once been mills, were now malls, and now the malls were closing. That you could see that there was this, because I went to Homestead because my dad worked there in the 60s. I wanted to go see it myself. And I went there and I parked, and I called him, I said, Dad, it's a big shopping mall. You know, I don't see the mill. So I think that concern and pain with what was happening would be the trend that I saw.
Todd, were there key messages that you thought the union wanted was hoping that the film would kind of project, or besides just telling the basic story, was there anything else in particular about the methods of organizing or the way a strike is conducted?
No, I know, because I was on strike in 1994. We were locked out in 2015, and then again on strike in 2021. I think all of them, I can honestly say, with the leadership of the International, because we had to follow out of the strategic campaigns, and they would give us guidelines of what we should do. I think all the unions conducted themselves pretty professionally, you know. And I don't know whether you really that this documentary really exposes how professional we were. I mean, we're professional. I mean, we got a hold of the local mayors. We got a hold of the chief of police, and I says, hey, listen, we're gonna have a big rally, and I'm inviting everybody. I'm inviting the painters, the sheeters, the carpenters, the mine workers, the teachers, I'm inviting everybody. The one during the lockout in 2015, we had over 700 people on the picket line. But I make sure I called the chief of police, and I says, hey, chief, just to let you know, and if there's any trouble, you got my number. I'm the bad guy, you know. So there was a lot of professionalism that's not exposed in the documentary. But at the end of the day, I'm sure that the company has seen this documentary now. And right now, and I'm speaking from my behalf of what has happened with me. I got hired in 1988, and I remember being in the 90s. You had to work at getting fired. You had to work at it. People didn't quit, but you had to work. They would give you an opportunity to better yourself and stay. The upper management team changed now, you know, come the year 2000, 2005, whatever. And now it's easier for them to fire you and get rid of you. So I'd have to believe that there's some members, and if they hear me, that'd be wonderful, that they would use this documentary as a learning tool and find out why nobody wants to work for this good company no more. Because you treat us like equipment, not human beings. You know, the welcome mat's not up for family members anymore like it once was. It's just not. You know, in the 90s, I can remember the big Trenton Parade, huge Christmas parade right after Thanksgiving, huge. You'd have your local 1196 float, and then you'd also have one of the Alligator ATI flatbed trucks. So the company would participate in it. and they'd have people up on it throwing candy off the truck or them cornballs or whatever they'd be doing, but there was some level of unity. Now the company won't participate in anything. Only when it's going to look good for them in the public eye, but it's not like it was before. So they really need to take a look at this document and understand we're human beings. We're not equipment. We're people. And guess what? If you don't want to treat us like human beings, we're going to move on now because you're not the best show in town anymore. So I hope they use it as a learning tool myself.
Well, Sam, you've shown the film many times now around the country for a lot of different audiences. What are the different orientations or responses that you get from the different audiences?
I mean, I think that there is a lot of support for the union. And I have to tell you, it's a funny thing because I think people, especially younger people now, are less familiar of this world of the union. And now they're starting to become a little bit more aware of it because it comes back in the news because, okay, Amazon's trying this. And I said Starbucks, maybe Starbucks is trying that. So people are sort of aware that there's something out there, but they haven't been raised on it the way I think some people in older generations were aware of. And I think that this kind of documentary, people see it and they start to understand a little better the history and the roots and the importance that the union plays in certain people's lives. And I think also they realize that this idea that we are so divided again as a country, most often because we don't get a chance to talk to people. People say, hey, I feel the same way. You could be here in the middle of a city and say, look, that's the biggest concern in our lives is getting a job where we feel like we're respected and where we could forward our lives. So I think that it's been eye-opening for a lot of people, and that's of course all we're trying to do with these Bertelsmann Foundation films. Yeah.
One thing that did happen, I interrupt, and I just sort of add to what Sam said. He did a film festival down in the Keys Rocks, so he invited me and a couple other union members. He rounded up a couple guys going down. I said, I'm coming down. So we went down, and there may have been about 30 people. In fact, Sam's dad was there. Yeah. So we watched the documentary, and one seat was empty next to me, and then there was a man and a woman and then a man. And they're watching the documentary, and I'm sitting with my union brothers, but I'm on the extreme right. And I noticed the woman started crying. I could hear her weeping a little bit. And I didn't look over. And then when the documentary was over, I sort of looked over just to see who it was. So we went out in the lobby, and she came up to me and she says, hey, did you know them guys in that film, in that documentary? She says that to me. And I says, well, I was in that documentary. She said, well, which one were you? I said, I was my grandson. She says, oh, well, I had a longer beard. My beard was real long. She says, I didn't recognize you. I says, yeah, that was me and my grandson in the very end. She said, well, that was you in the beginning too. I said, yeah. So she comes over. Her husband's with her. She comes over and she hugs me. She's about my age. She hugs me. And she says, I'm so sorry that happened to you, but I got to tell you something. She says, my grandfather was a union man. My dad was a union man. And for some reason, as I got older, I just didn't believe in unions. She says, but I got to tell you something. That documentary changed me. She says, I never knew things like that could happen to people. I never knew that. She says, I was very moved by this documentary, and it actually changed me. So it made me sort of feel good.
That's an awesome story. I hadn't heard that story.
Yeah.
Sam, what's your next documentary subject? Do you have anything?
Yeah, we keep things cooking. And I know there was some links that got put in the app. There was one to our website, which is bfnadocs.org. Actually, the thing that I'm working on now, in some ways it reminds me of this. In some ways it's extremely different. It's about parts of Serbia where basically, and by parts, I mean parts like industrial parts. So this is like mining area, like copper mines, where China has become a major investor and come in and basically bought the mine, bought the company, bought the surrounding town, and working with people there. And so there's some similarities because it's, again, guys just trying to get up, men and women, and pursue this kind of daily life, working for a company town that's been there for a century that they believe in, that's undergoing tremendous change. That's been a really complicated project, but we're wrapping it up, and probably hoping to premiere that one early next year. And then, it's always something different. I will say rarely with this kind of impact or emotional attachment that I've found with this one.
Yeah, that brings us to our first audience question from Dean Mugianis, also a filmmaker. He says, one of those strong, intimate moments was when the father was telling his son about having to give up karate lessons. How did that come about so that you were able to really be accepted into their home for that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it happens over time. That didn't happen the first week. That happened maybe 3 or 4 months into the project. You ask, and some people will say yes, and some people will say no. And I have to say, that's 100 billion% okay. Anybody that says no to me, and if I don't make it clear to people that it's okay to say no, then I'm not doing my job right. Because it is okay to not want to bring somebody with a camera into your home. But that's a guy that I saw him recently. I saw Ryan recently. I was out in the area, and we went for lunch, and it's just because, and that feels great to me because I said, okay, so you invited me in for this private moment. I put it in a movie, and we're still friends. Like, you feel good about it. You felt like it was shown in an honest and fair way, and he did. So in that kind of situation, you also try to film it respectfully. So that's why we kind of kept a distance. And that's the magic of documentary films. And so much has to go into getting a 2-minute conversation like that. So much has to go into that you never end up using, that ends up on a hard drive. But I could sit here and say it's because I did something right, but really I think it's just the generosity of the individual to invite me into their home. And, I thank him for that. I thank him for that, and try to do an honest job with it. And once every project, there's a couple times when you mean to hit play and don't. And I'm just happy that whenever something really powerful happens, when it's not one of those times that you accidentally realize that you didn't record, because that's not something you can do take 2 of.
Yeah. Here's a follow question for Todd. What do you think newly organizing workers, say in the service industry, from Starbucks to Amazon, really everywhere, healthcare, what do you think they could learn from this film about what you went through? Or new techniques?
I think not only they got to realize all the way from the lowest, the newest member to the highest member, the president of the local, we all run parallel. There's no stepping stone as far as emotion or entitlement, or that's why they call it a union. And I hope I wish it was a program that would help educate a lot of people who are joining a union, and they'd get a better understanding of what your duty is and what your union responsibility is. I think that might be a weak area right now, but I hope they could use this as a learning tool. And I'm not saying to show all your cards, but we're human beings here. We're not equipment.
Here's a question from Bob Mason. Was anyone at ATI asked to make comments during the film or about the film? Sam, would you?
I did reach out to them, and they said that I think the furthest we got is that they would talk, but not on camera. And then it kind of didn't get any further than that. So they were given the opportunity to speak, but they told me they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to be a part of the video. And in the end, from my perspective, and I know everyone sees it very differently, from my perspective, it was really about the guys and the experience. And I would have been very happy to do an interview with anybody from the company that had wanted to speak. I don't really know very much about the company, and so I don't have. This is not meant to be a documentary necessarily about the company from my eyes. It's about the experience of the guys going through the union, and what it means to be a steel worker, which, let's be honest, is a legendary profession in this country. They named football teams after this profession. I mean, this is a big deal job that's gone under a lot of stress. I mean, it was one of those jobs that was part of being an American. And that's why it was so cool to find that old footage from the 50s and 60s when it's your birthright. They literally say that. They show a little kid and they say it's your birthright to have this industry. And that's not the case anymore. And that was really the perspective that I was focusing on.
Susan Dusky has a question for Todd. What was it like to go back to work after the strike? And
well, you're asking the wrong guy. Because in that documentary, I even tell everybody in the very beginning, I say, hey, this battle is your battle. I'm here. I'm going to fight with you. At the end of the day, there's nothing there for me. I'm going to leave. And during that strike, I retired, which was a very hard transition for me. It was very difficult. I retired May 31st, and I think the strike went on another 34 days or whatever. So I did retire out during the strike. But I still went down to Union Hall. I participated, but I was no longer a union official.
we had a question before we even started from one of our members about the music in the film. Like I say, we don't have any voiceover, but there's a lot of really, really compelling music. Sam, how did that happen?
Yeah, the music, I just kind of feel my way through it. I have a general idea of what I'm looking for. And just try to find something that meets the moment. And that's why, I talked about the importance of steel workers in the United States. And this is not a story that is 6 months. This is a story that is 200 years in the telling. I'm just throwing maybe longer. And that's why I had that kind of operatic feeling at the beginning, because this is that long. This is the story, a lot of times it's a story of our country, in a sense. So that's why I wanted to have this big kind of operatic feeling at the beginning and end. And then you just try to find music that vibes off the feeling in the scene. And you don't want it to overpower the scene, because the star, you want to always be, it's sort of like background. The star is going to be the individuals that are really giving you their lives. It becomes corny if the music is overtaking that. These guys, they didn't need music to make what they were saying powerful. So you weren't reaching for anything with the music. You were accenting because the content was there. You had the chance to just, and look, I also think that if you're going to watch this documentary, it takes a little patience. I tell people, I joke sometimes, this isn't Fast and Furious 9. I understand that. This rewards people that want to sit and zone in and watch carefully. And we try to give a music that creates that environment so that you're in a position to walk that mile in somebody else's shoes.
Speaking of walking a mile in very different shoes, a question from Ramo Lardini. The film shows numbers of scabs. What do you see as being a strategy for addressing scabs and maybe even getting them to proceed in solidarity with those in the strike? And there's kind of a follow-up from Bob Mason. Can Todd give his opinion on why so many union members tend to vote for Republican candidates who obviously don't have labor's interests at heart? So a couple of things there: strike breakers and union breakers. Any thoughts?
Tough questions go to Todd.
Yeah. First of all, the scabs. I mean, people that showed up. I mean, there's a little bit in that film. Were you able to engage at all of them?
Is that to you, Sam, or is that to me?
No, I think that's for you. I mean,
as far as engaging with us, you mean?
Yeah. How do you get them to come around to a different point of view and support the union and honor the strike?
Well, you know what? These people are from Texas. They're from Georgia. They're not. They're not hometown boys. You know what I mean? They're not living in across the bridge from us. We'll never ever see them again. During the lockout, they were from other countries. And so they'll never see us again. They were being bussed in, bussed out. At the end of the day, they're there to make a living. Being a scab is what they do. That's their title. Are you going to turn them around? No, you're not going to turn them around. I know that in the past, there's been some guys that were promised jobs. They were promised jobs and thinking they're going to get jobs after the work stoppage is over. And, that was made very clear by the International. Don't be hiring any scabs. That's part of it. You will not be hiring anybody that was working during our stoppage. So, as far as us having any direct conversation, zero conversation, zero. There was no conversation. We're talking about generations. We're talking about different decades. In 1994, when I was on strike, I'll never forget this. One of our supervisors, and it was in the wintertime, he actually brought us corn. Well, it was right before wintertime. He brought us corn on the cob. Right to the picket line. All kinds of corn. We have wrapped in foil, thrown in our barrel. We're cooking away. Now here it is. Fast forward 2015. Direct order from upper management. Don't you even look at them people. They would tell their direct foreman, their management team, you drive past them, don't wave to them. You put your windows up. Don't even acknowledge them. So that's how much the generations have changed, and the management team has changed to treat us like third-class citizens now. And you think we're never going to come back to work? And you think for 1 minute I'm not going to remember the way you treated me on the picket line? Are you kidding me? What are they thinking?
What about the idea then, as there were some opinions expressed by members in the film that said basically the Republican Party is the worker person's party. Obviously, that's been a slow buildup over the decades, but how do you even discuss that?
That's a matter of their choice, their opinion. As I said, everybody's entitled to their opinion. Just like training a person to become a good union member, you have to give the reason. You have to give a reason for people to say, "Hey, I'm a Democrat." You have to show the Democrats are all about working class and that we are successful. So I could see what it was a divided union there. I could see that, and I could see why.
What do you think, Sam?
Well, here's one thing I think. It's an extremely complicated question. It's a really complicated question. But I think one thing that was interesting to me is that, at this time when these politics divide us so much, that union, which may have been split politically, didn't let that interfere with, I wouldn't even say their union, I would say in their friendship, that you would have, that wasn't, something that was, they didn't see each other as enemies over a candidate. And I think you heard Todd give an incredibly diplomatic answer, and I think that's how they feel about it. I think that from what I saw, and maybe there's something to learn from that, there wasn't a division on political lines at a time where everything else in our country is divided. I think that, like I say, if the common sense wisdom is that the Democrats are for the union and for the working people, and that's why union people have voted for Democrats for decades and decades and decades. Well, if that's true, my most profound advice as a non-politician is you better get out there and prove that. You better not take that for granted. Because if you start taking it for granted and you stop connecting with those people and you stop showing victories, even if your policies would benefit them, if you're not connecting with them, they're not going to vote for you, especially if somebody else is connecting with them. So I never viewed this as something wrong with the people. My advice is, if it's true that the policy is on your side, then hey, you have a winning argument. Get out there and make it.
Sam, what's your ultimate vision for this film going forward? It's being picked up by a lot of film festivals. I think it's going to be on PBS and even our hometown WQED here.
Yes, yes, that's extremely exciting. For me, that's wonderful. So we're nonprofit, the Bertelsmann Foundation. This is we never are going to sell this in any kind of way, or it's always going to be free to the public. But that makes PBS a wonderful outlet for us, and we're very, very excited that this film is going to come to WQED. I think our premiere date is January 5th. Hopefully, there'll be a couple chances to catch it then. I know then it's going to broadcast subsequently on MPT, which is the public television in Maryland. So we're very excited about that. And then very soon it's going to go online and be freely available. And then, my hope is that people watch it, that it becomes exactly that educational tool that Todd suggests, that people check it out and share it and talk about it. And that's just my hope for it.
Now, the Bertelsmann Foundation itself, I know it has various offices around the world. I think Germany, obviously. I think Barcelona, Spain. And how do they find out about you? I mean, how do they decide we really want to have somebody essentially roving the world, making films about this? Because there's a lot of people making documentary films about political subjects, but they seem to have really invested in this.
Yeah, well, we have excellent leadership right now. That's that interesting story. I mean, that's also something that you have to reflect upon, because I know one of the big struggles with ATI or the workers feel about their leadership is that they're not seeing eye to eye. And it's a really disillusioning feeling when that happens. And in a sense, we kind of had the opposite, and where we have an executive director, Irene Brom, who came in and said, and because she came in and we were just kind of doing this on a real small scale, because nobody ever thought that this could be something that a research organization would do. And she said, hey, this could work. And she gave us a chance to pursue, and also not even just to pursue documentaries, but to kind of find these stories. So it was sort of Irene's idea. She said, I would like to know a little bit more about what's going on in Pennsylvania. And so I did the research, and then she's open to the idea of, I think that tell that story. And hey, quality leadership, you can't, just like the Democrats taking something you can't take that for granted. So you better enjoy it while you have it. And I think that that's a vision that's extended through a lot of what we're doing at Bertelsmann Foundation right now. And so I encourage people to check out our other stuff. And the
one film, Fight for West Virginia, did that focus on a specific incident, or?
Yeah, so that's about the candidacy. It's about a couple different things. It's about the opioid epidemic. It's about miners that have kind of lost their job and finding work in other sectors. And then it's also getting back to this, what's up with the rural Democrats. It's about this guy, Richard Ojeda, who's a longtime military veteran who comes back, a real tough guy, who runs as a Democrat in this very rural Republican region. And the idea there is precisely to kind of get those to understand, where are we? Why are we? Because these are, again, areas that maybe once upon a time were very Democrat, and they're not anymore. And I think that's something worth understanding, what's happening there. So that's a good one. If people, you can find that on our website. It's called The Fight for West Virginia. You type it into Google, it'll show up. The cool thing about our stuff, it's free. No one's going to ask you a password. You don't have to worry about forgetting your login and resetting it 8 times because you don't remember it's no 2-factor authentication. You just click play and you can watch it.
Any more audience questions? Anybody have any more thoughts or insights about the film? Guess we'll see that in the chat. Any concluding statements you, Todd or Sam, you'd like to make about, this film? Or
well, I guess I just this is a good opportunity for me to thank Sam for coming to our hometown, and I think it's changed not only our personal perspective on how we're treated. I think a lot of other people recognize, how big industry is impactful and how a big company don't acknowledge it. I mean, they just, it's not the old ways anymore. It's not like a family, like Sam said, my dad worked there, my brother worked there, my uncle worked there, it's not that way anymore. So it's a different industry. It's a different time. I hope a lot of people watch us and get educated all the way down to new union members so they can understand, and it's kind of interesting because, you do this documentary, you meet this film guy and you shake hands and then you eat a fish sandwich and the documentary's done, you'll never see him again. Well, he's become my friend now. So, and we've talked many times on the phone about nothing, and it's kind of an interesting relationship because here's a guy that didn't really know me. I really didn't know him. No, I feel like, and I even told his dad one day when I met him, I said, if I had a son, I wish he was just like you.
Oh, God.
That's what I said. But I mean,
that's a very nice comment.
But what's funny? If a company could treat union members or build a relationship like me and Sam have built, well, what a great company to be to work for. And it's not hard. You just be yourself and don't be greedy and just be authentic. And the companies, there's more greed than caring about, our health care. There's more about taking care of the upper management instead of taking care of the people that are the hands-on steel people. That's what they need to open their eyes and take care of the hands-on steel people.
It's funny Todd said that because the first thing I was going to say was to thank him. I mean, that's my concluding comment. It's just a sincere thank you. And this would not have been possible if Todd hadn't been open-minded and continued. And it goes for all the guys there that shared a story. And I'm really thankful for the audience too, because I feel like when you get people to open up like that, it's then incumbent on me a couple things. One is to share their stories honestly and to not take advantage of it and not to take that and use it for the wrong reasons. That's step one. But then step two is make that worth their while. Make it so people see it. So that's why I get out and fight for these projects and these films, because I know what they shared with me is sort of like they've given something to me and it's up to me to share it with other people. So I'm very thankful for the audience as well for watching it. A lot of you got the link to this film beforehand. You can feel free to share that link. At this point, we've done our festival run. It's getting ready to go out. If you know other people that should see this film, please feel free to share it. And Todd, it really does mean a lot to me what you say. And I feel the same way. And I feel like I'm doing something right.
Actually, there's one more question for Todd. Don't run away.
Oh, I was going to run away. I was just going to say one other thing real quick. So Sam made front page of our local newspaper.
Yeah.
So how I feel about him is very important too. So I'll be sending this to you, Sam. So
please do.
So Todd, where do things stand in terms of labor and management relations with ATI and the local 1196 right now that you know of?
I think there's a lot of cracks in their foundation now. And I'm not saying we don't have a strong safety program. I think the level of unity that we once had when I was president local, it's not about the new local. It's not about the new president. It's about change and the level of unity we had with the company for our safety program, for everything. I could call somebody pretty high up on the management team on a Saturday night, and they're going to answer my phone call. They could call me on a Saturday night. I'm going to answer their phone call. Now they'll wait until Monday. It's different now. It's different. But you know what? They have to change. We become a product of their environment.
Sam, real quick question just came in. When you showed this at University of Pittsburgh about a month ago, what was the reaction? I imagine those were mostly students.
Yes. We showed it at the University of Pittsburgh, and it was mostly students. And they, I think they got the message. You see. And then we went the next day and showed it at Penn State, and it's interesting to see young people react because I'm not sure they've been exposed to that idea of a union way of life. But when you do it in these kind of areas, there are always a number of students that have parents and grandparents who know all about the union and talked about it every day at the dinner table. And so it's always really cool for me to see those students raise their hand and they're so excited to tell their story. So one student was asking about the train, because there was a train. What was it, Todd? Because this is the kind of thing Todd knows better than me.
Norfolk Southern.
Right. She was like, I saw my dad's train in the film, and I know they would never cross a union line. Do you know if they crossed a line? And I was like, I know that they didn't, that there was, because I saw Todd, like I wasn't on both sides of the conversation, but I saw when he was those conversations with the train people, and you could tell how proud she was. Like she was visibly proud and happy to share that moment in the classroom. So that's the kind of standout moment for me from those visits. Students are excellent. I mean, documentaries are such a wonderful way to reach students right now, I think.
Yeah, great. Well, John, do you want to take it back? And first of all, thanks everybody out there. We may not be able to hear you through the muting, but if you want to clap, feel free. This is really great to see Todd and Sam George here talking about the film, and hopefully, it will inspire others of you out there. The technology is there to make your own films about your own work situations and issues. And here's John Hare, president of the Battle of Homestead.
Thanks so much, Larry. And let me just recommend more recognition and thanks to Larry. He's our new operations manager, and he's tireless in terms of the work that he's put in, helping us to produce our programs, but also helping us to develop our organization so that when we do have our Center for Labor History and the Future of Work, this will be a wonderful resource that our archives can present to people that want to find out what it's like to strike in a steel mill in 2021, and to reflect on where we are today. Are there mechanisms for people that work in an industry to have input to the management of that industry? Is there cooperation in trying to solve problems rather than antagonism over stockholders' demands for higher profits? And I'm very proud to be able to have our organization sponsor such a dialogue, and to have the opportunity to have our organization try to give voice to people in the workforce that are sharing that vision and fighting for it in their lives at work. And we really appreciate it. Also, thanks to Suzanne Donsky, our program committee chair. We've had a wonderful program series this year, and every single one of them, I think you will find, has quality information from the mouths of the people affected in our region. And we're really proud of that. Let me encourage folks that are new to our organization to join Battle of Homestead Foundation. If you do, you'll receive a card that'll give you free admission to you and a party of 4 for the year to the Heinz History Center, and also to the Western Pennsylvania Sports Museum, the Fort Pitt Museum at Point Park, and the Meadowcroft Rock Shelter and Historic Village. Our annual dues are $20, $10 for students and retirees. And also, please consider a tax-deductible contribution to our organization. You can do that. Check the address that's provided in the chat. Some of you did it already through your Eventbrite registration. We thank you so much. And remember our website, battleofhomestead.org. You can always go there and be able to access the resources from prior programming, and certainly sign up to receive our weekly email blasts about what's going on. One more upcoming event. It's another film, this time a in-person attendance at a real theater. And we're talking about a premiere showing of another movie about steel and steel workers called City of Steel, made by longtime Battle of Homestead filmmaker named Bruce Spiegel. Bruce has several films in the hopper, but this one is also a labor of love from him. He grew up in Swissvale, and he could look over the river and see what was going on at the mills and the valley, and it has a lot to say as well about the decline of manufacturing and the end of steel making in so many of the mills, and that's why ATI is such a treasure. Still there, still producing, unlike Homestead and Duquesne and so many others, J&L, etc. Come to our showing of City of Steel. You have to register through Eventbrite. It's Saturday, December 3rd at 6 p.m. at the AMC Waterfront 22 Cineplex in West Homestead. Yeah, Sam, that's the waterfront shopping mall where your dad used to work. Unfortunately, it's a shopping mall, but there's a big movie theater there. Everyone, thank you so much. We really value your coming to our programs and taking the time to participate. We hope you agree that it's been a worthwhile time. I certainly think so. And thanks again to our guests. Go up and see Local 1196 in Brackenridge. Right outside, you'll see a huge stone. Todd, just tell the people what that stone is, okay?
That's the stone we brought down to our hall on the anniversary of Fanny Sellen's assassination. It was actually the stone that she laid upon. And it's in front of our union hall now, and that's what we were discussing earlier. We need to see about getting a plaque. That way people don't think it's just part of our landscape and you want to move it around. It's very significant. Great.
And they have quite a tradition inside the building, lots of graphics and pictures on the wall. It's a treasure in the area, and should be one of the sites for a labor history tour. So thank you very much, Todd, for participating, and greetings to all your union members at 1196. Everyone, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Check our website, but do your best if you can to do as our new elected senator says, support the union way of life. And thank you very much. And Sam, good luck in all your future endeavors. So,
thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Everyone, solidarity forever.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Adios.